What's good people, it's JayCactus back again with another tutorial, and in this video I'm going to be making a boom bap type beat. It's been a minute since I put out a boom bap video, and to be honest this is the kind of music that I grew up listening to. You know, I grew up listening to AZ, Mobb Deep, Nas, Wu-Tang, just to name a few of the OGs. So even though I like making drill and trap beats, I always come back to this style of music because it's what made me fall in love with hip hop. So I haven't prepared anything for this video other than picking a sample. So I'm going to chop it up, see what I can come up with, and yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so I'm not going to play the original sample just because I know that YouTube can be funny with things like that and I don't want any form of strike on the account. But basically when I'm chopping up a sample, the first thing that I'll do is bring it into editing and I'll have a listen through and just find some parts that I like. And I'll try and get a perfect loop, so whether it's an 8 bar, 16 bar, 32, whatever you want. Or you could take a few different loops just to add variation in your chop. So when I'm listening through and I find a loop that I like, I'll highlight it. I always make sure that loop mode is on and I click this arrow. Because when you click this arrow and it's off, it means that when you're listening to it through, it doesn't follow it along. So, you know, it doesn't mess it up when you're trying to track it. So I'll also have this on snap to 0 crossing. And what that does is, if you zoom in, when you're selecting a point, it will basically snap to a point where there's a node. And a node is basically, see, it won't let me select anything down there. So this is the closest to a node it will get. A node is basically a point where there's minimum amplitude. So if you look at that green line in the middle, you want a point where the two circles meet on that line. And that's going to stop any clicks or pops when you loop in the sample. So if you've selected a loop and you're listening to it back and you can hear a click or a pop at the end of it, the chances are that you've just selected the wrong point or you're not on a node. You're not at that green line where the circles meet. So just have a flick through, try to get that perfect loop, and then from there you can use this tool to bring it onto the playlist. Sometimes I'll bring it into another editing just to maybe make some fine adjustments to the end. Like if you're still getting them clicks or pops, sometimes I'll like highlight the end and then click this to fade it out. And then once I've got my loop, I'll bring it onto the playlist. As you can see here, I put it in stretch mode so that when I'm stretching it, it basically doesn't change the pitch of the sample. So I always put that in stretch mode. And then from here, if I've made any adjustments, like if I need to cut any off or if I've rearranged it, sometimes I'll just make it unique as a sample again, just so that this one small section is its own sample. And then once I bring that into Fruity Slicer, it just makes it a bit easier then. So I've already dragged it in. Let me just cut that. So once you've got it in here, you can go to the slice tool and select beat. If you don't know the BPM, you can go from beats. So if you're listening through, just count how many beats there are and then change the number here, and that will just make the chop more precise. So from here, you can just start having a play through. And I'm actually going to play with the pitch. In fact, I might keep it down, just minus 200. I like the way that sounds. So it's already, if you don't want it to auto slice, just make sure auto dump is off. I'm just going to cut that. So I want something like this. So you can hear that was a bit off time at the end, but I'm going to come back into here, piano roll, and I'm going to quantize this. And you can hear there's a lot of bass in this sample, so I'm going to pull up an EQ. have to cut out quite a bit of this. think it's quite sharp as well, so I might cut out a few highs. And you can hear there's drums in this, and when it comes to a track like this where there's a lot of drums all the way through, like usually when I'm chopping samples, I'll try find parts where there's no drums because it just makes it easier, because you can't really remove drums from samples. You can try, but it never does it completely. But you can mask them with heavier drums, which is what I usually do. When it comes to drums, you don't want trap drums. Like boom bap drums are always using realistic drums. So find some boom bap samples, some good ones like Cardiac's drum kit, Illminds. There's quite a few for boom bap, but let's see what I've got. I know I've used some recently, so I'm just gonna go in my recently used ones. Stuff like this. When you hear them open hats that are like live drums, perfect. And those kind of snares. So let's just throw a snare in for now. Definitely want to use that open hat. Hi-hats, you don't want them to be strictly on grid, so what I'll usually do is record them in. But when I'm screen recording, there's always latency. If you're getting latency between your keyboard, basically latency is like the delay between when you're pressing the keyboard to when the sound is loaded on the computer. But you can adjust the buffer length, but if you bring it too low, your computer might not be able to handle it, especially if you're screen recording. But I'll try it low. I see what I mean. So there's a little bit, but let me just try record it in. That's a bit off. The latency's throwing me off, but basically I will usually record it in, but if you can't record it in, then what I do is fill in each two-step if you want that rhythm. And then to make it a bit more natural, this is a nice trick for boom bap. So I select every other note, just like this. I'm just holding Control and Shift right now, and then just dragging and clicking the ones, every other one, right? And then I'm gonna hold Alt and the mouse wheel just to drag the velocity down. And then I'm gonna press Control and A to highlight them all, Alt and Shift, and then press right a couple times, just so it's a bit off grid. And this just it should sound a bit more natural now. Because if you think when a real drummer is playing, they're never getting every note perfectly on time, and the volume's not always going to be the same. So when you're making boom bap, you always want that swing, that realistic vibe, right? So even with the snares and the kicks, you could bring them a bit off grid, but I'm going to leave the snares on grid for now. So when it comes to the kick, I always just listen to the chop that I've done and try and imagine the pattern in my head, and then I will record the kick pattern in. Something like that. As I said, I've got latency in my keyboard, so that's not going to be right. So I won't normally quantize the kicks, but I am going to, and then I'm going to make some little tweaks after. So I'm just going to play with the velocity. If you want to add more bounce, you can bring this swing dial up. This is just to taste, so just see what sounds right to you. You'll put it all the way up. Might be a bit too much. Right, so from here, I might add a few more cymbals, maybe some rides, just some, you know, classic hip hop sounds, but I think I want a bass in for now. And when it comes to bass, some people will use the bass from the sample, kind of with an EQ. They could cut out the bass and treat that as a separate track and then enhance it, but for this one I want to add my own bass. So when it comes to boom bap bass, you want live bass sounds, so like an electric bass guitar. And then if you wanted even more energy, you could add a ride, maybe just in the hook, so have it like. And then with the snare and the kick and the bass, I want the kick to be sidechained to the bass and then the snare to be sidechained to the sample. So to do that, I'm going to click on the kick, right click here and click on sidechain to this track. But instead of cutting everything out the bass, I only want it to cut certain frequencies. So I'm going to use Pro Q3 and I'm going to come here, go to processing, stereo sidechain, I'm going to select kick. And now what happens is, if I go to the kick first, you can see what frequency it's hitting at. So it's around 63. If I come to the bass and go to 63, what I can do here is, I'm just going to have it on nothing for now, but I'm going to make it dynamic. And then when you make it dynamic, you can click on this. Sorry, you click on auto. See how it's bringing it down automatically when the kick's hitting. And then I can bring this bottom one down. So I don't want it to cut too much out, maybe 3 dB, you can tighten it up. You need to click this little button here. Alright, so I'm quickly going to arrange it and then I'll talk you through some of the processes that I do afterwards. So when I listened to the beat with headphones on, the kick sounded dead. It sounded alright through a speaker, so I had to make a couple changes. And the other thing was, when I was listening to the sample, I could hear a hi-hat that wasn't really on time with my hi-hat. So I EQ'd that other hi-hat out a bit. So I'll play you what I've got now and I'll talk you through what I did. For the sample, I've just kept the original loop, but pitched down, just so it's matching our key. And I automated the filter. So that was just done manually through automation, just by linking it to the controller. And then for the hook, the filter is off. And then for the verse, I've kept the same chop. I played around with some different chops, but I like what I've done here, and I just wanted to filter things out for the verse. And then I've also added in some drum breaks as well, so, or some drum fill, should I say. So I slowed the sample right down for this. So obviously for the verse, the filter's coming in. And that kick that you're hearing, that's 2 kicks layered. And then I'll just play with the filter here. So I hope you like the beat. It's just something different today to the usual drill and trap beats. So if you're liking it, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I upload videos every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. So I'll see you next time.